We'll go straight to that interview that we recorded earlier on alongside or with Professor PLO Lumumba, who's a staunch Pan-Africanist. His word in regards to the death of Magufuli and what Africa can learn moving forward. Let's get to hear that. Pan-Africanist Professor PLO Lumumba joins us now. Professor, thank you so much for your time this morning. My name is Linda Alela. Briefly and kindly share your personal and fond memory of Professor Magufuli as a Pan-African.
Remember a man,
Professor, can you hear me?
As a great Pan-Africanist. Had the opportunity to talk about. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
I had the opportunity to talk about the work of President Magufuli almost 6 years ago. And as the saying goes, we who are on this earth, we are in the habit of lionizing and rhapsodizing people when they are dead, and we do not do so when they are alive. By God's grace, I do not fall in that category. I had the opportunity very early on to recognize that President Magufuli was, as I said then, a breath of fresh air in the African political arena. He came into a country that was going through economic difficulties. And if you have had the advantage of traveling across Tanzania like I have, it is the things that his administration did and continue to do that distinguish him as a great Tanzanian brother. And it is true that we have noted from the kind of emotions, the outpouring of emotion that we have seen, is a testament to the fact that indeed he was a man of the people, he typed the right codes, and that he did what was in the best interest of Tanzania, and I dare say Africa. This is an individual, and he told me this himself. When he came into office, he said that workers must be paid on the 23rd of every month, and he monitored it. He monitored that. He told me that he found that there were 14,000 ghost workers in the government, and he caused them to be removed. He came in and found that mining companies from the West and from different parts of the world had not paid taxes in the neighborhood of 200 billion Tanzanian shillings. He caused them to do that. This is a man who came and found the sector of agriculture was tottering along. He revived it. He came in and found that the Chinese had entered into a contract to run the port of Bagamoyo at usurious loans, and he abandoned it. He came in and brought in the Egyptian to do the Julius Kambarage Nyerere hydroelectric power. He came in and caused gas to be brought from Mtwara to Dar es Salaam to generate power. He came in and ensured that their SGR, which is electrified from Dar es Salaam to Morogoro and now heading to Mwanza, is done at a third of the cost of what we used to finance our own SGR in Kenya. Definitely, this is a man who had faith in our ability. He came in and revived the Air Tanzania. One can go on. And one who is a true Pan-Africanist will miss John Joseph Pombe Magufuli.
Speaking of which,
I have no doubt in my mind that Mama Samia Suluhu Hassan will continue on the same trajectory.
Well, thank you so much. African Union on constant occasions having these sessions has spoken of a scenario where, yes, it's important to root out corruption in Africa. Just how best can Kenya as a country, the African continent at large, leverage on some of the lessons they pick on Magufuli's leadership style to root out corruption, to deal with all this animosity that is meted upon the people, injustices, and the aspect of lack of development?
You know, when I listened to our own President Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta speaking in Dodoma, and he was quick to recognize that the Magufuli approach was the right approach. What we need in this country, and I think President Magufuli had spoken about it, is to exercise the ghost of ethnicity. Ethnicity of the negative kind stands in the way of execution of many things in this country. If you want to arrest an individual, he weaponizes his ethnic group and he is immunized thereby. But I hold the view that President Kenyatta, particularly now when he is on the last leg of his last term, must really draw the line in the sand. When, for example, he said that those who had engaged in the Kemsa heist would be punished, one wants to see that happening. We want to see our political arena being purged of this thuggery, clanism, and ethnicity. And that requires resolve. And it also requires a population that gets angry when people engage in theft. In Kenya, we don't. Instead, we celebrate people who engage in activities which undermine us. So we too are co-authors of our own misfortune. But in a nutshell, I hold the view that President Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta is now in a very unique position as one who will be leaving office to really stamp his foot on the ground and say, we are not going to allow corruption to happen.
He has the luxury of time?
Like what?
Does he have the luxury of time?
You know, when you are dealing with a nation, you never think about time. That is the problem that we have. When you are dealing with a nation, this nation will be here for many generations. So what President Kenyatta should do is to play his part. When you are dealing with a nation, you play your part and hand over the baton. And remember that this is not to say that it's only President Kenyatta who must engage in this exercise. All of us, including yourself, even you, the media, you must ask yourself, you lionize thieves. And when you lionize them, you give them the oxygen of publicity. So the media must play its part, the academia must play its part, the executive must play its part, the legislature must play its part, the judiciary must play its part. This is not the time for critics whose only desire is to find fault where there is none. It is your duty to ask, what part are we playing? And you could see that in Tanzania. The media was playing its part, and the media that did not play its part were called to account. That is how nations move away from the muck and mire of ethnicity and corruption.
All right. Now, in just 5 years, and Magufuli's track record has been humongous. What can you attribute that to? I mean, you have articulated that well, but then again, do you suppose there is any other African leader that comes close to his style?
Prudent use of resources. When you use your resources prudently, then they have to be seen. When, for example, he caused people to pay taxes and the taxes are then deployed in infrastructure, then you can see it. When you are undertaking procurement of medical equipment, it is used properly. Look at the converse in Kenya. Look at what is happening with our Kenya Airways. Look at what is happening at KEMSA. Look at what is happening at the Pyrethrum Board. Look at what is happening in the counties. Look at what the president himself complains about, that at 2 billion shillings is stolen on a daily basis. When you find yourself in that space, then you don't have the ability to show the results of your labor. President Magufuli has simply utilized the resources of Tanzania for the benefit of the people. And I've gone to Tanzania several times. You go to Tanzania, you see infrastructure. Look, all sectors, agriculture, look at the education sector, look at the health sector, look at the infrastructure generally. And he stands out. But that is not to say that he's the only one. I can cite countries that I've visited. President Paul Kagame in Rwanda. You go to Rwanda and you see that there is some work that has been done there. Go to President Nana Dankwa-Addo Akufo-Addo in Ghana and you see some work has been done there. Go to Botswana and you see President Masisi has done something. Go down to Namibia and you see that President Hage Geingob has done something. So there are a number of African leaders who have done useful things. But I think that in the pantheon of leaders, John Joseph Pombe Magufuli stands out as really the best in deploying local resources for the benefit of the people.
All right, well, and let's get to the aspect of, foreign relations, African integration. And as they would say, there's quite a thin line between what is foreign aid and what is foreign investment, or, these people coming into different countries, respective countries, and having investors on board. Magufuli has been castigated for creating an environment that is extremely hostile for investors. Case in point, that Acacian or Tanzanian mining firm that was asked to pay back the tax by the Tanzanian government. Was he justified in his radical approach, one, to foreigners or foreign investment, or better say it, foreign aid? And do you suppose then that helped Tanzania be what it is today?
Samora Moises Machel of Mozambique used to say that when you hear the Western countries praising an African leader, you must know that they are exploiting their country and bleeding it to death.
Yeah.
Whenever an African leader is doing things that are in the best interest of the continent of Africa, he'll be vilified by the Western press and by the westernized African press. What President Magufuli was saying and telling the Acacias of this world, you've been trading in Tanzania for over 20 years, and for over 20 years you have not paid taxes. Is that investment?
No.
You've been taking our cashew nut at a throwaway price, and you don't have that money coming back into Tanzania. You've been using forex bureaus to take money out of Tanzania. In other words, he was hitting them where it hurts most. And this thing called foreign investment, we must be very wary of it, because the neo-colonial project sometimes now uses investment as a Trojan horse to come back and reap where they stopped during the colonial project. And it is incumbent upon us as Africans to be wary of that. The criticism that you receive or that you hear about President Magufuli is simply because he stopped them in their track. And I'm very unhappy, for example, with my country, Kenya, when we enter into bilateral relationship, trade relationship with the United Kingdom and the United States of America outside of the framework of the East African Community or outside of the framework of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. That is how they use us by dividing us and making us weak. So Magufuli will be castigated simply because he did the right thing. There is evidence on the ground to demonstrate that the things they did, the choices he made, were the right choices. Simply remember what Dambisa Moyo of Zambia said in a book, Dead Aid. No country has ever realized sustainable development because of aid. If you want to invest in our countries, do so in a manner that is beneficial the country and not parasitic upon the country. That is the message, unequivocal, clear, patriotic, and adorable from John Pombe Joseph Magufuli.
Well, when you speak about that, reminds me of the aspect of a social contract and how lack of it has been, attributed to the fact that Africa is officially selling itself to neo-colonialists again. Well, say for Tanzania, who seem to have a strong one, that is the social contract, that guides their policies against or from the West, so to speak. How do we strengthen our very own in terms, of ensuring that we have a social contract that binds, that protects our cultures, so that even when the investors come into the country, then they do not end up infiltrating on us as opposed to, getting ourselves to be better?
As a country, it is incumbent upon us to ensure that the political leadership is a political leadership that is aware and loves the country. One of the problems that we have in Kenya is that those who get into politics get into it because it is the shortest cut to material wealth, not to serve. And if you look at the quality of debate in parliament, and I was listening to the debate when the Kenyan parliamentarians were debating the 25-year pact between the United Kingdom and Kenya, you get the feeling that these individuals have no idea what the British are trying to do.
Right.
You are being tied down here to a 25-year program, and it is opening your market, and you are being told that the goods that you are going to deal in are primary goods such as tea, such as coffee, no value addition, and you don't see people engaging and debating. The quality of our parliamentarians and their disinterest in things that affect this country is one of the problems that we have. Then there is another problem, the population. The population of Kenya is not engaged. The civic engagement is absent, so that we don't call our leaders to account. Right now, you can see even in matters as mundane as importation of the COVID-19 vaccines, we are being told Sputnik is here and everything, and in the next few years, they'll all be here. But you don't hear the consistent, informed voice of our political class. And this, if you permit me, was one of the reasons why in the context of the East African Community Common Market, we took the view that as a region, we could engage a lot more constructively with diplomacy being aid-led. And if we did that in the context of the East African Community, we would leverage on our numbers, which is anything between 200 million and 300 million. And the bilateral particularities and specificities would then be dealt with within the context of the East African Community. So that Tanzania would deal with diamond and cashew nut and Tanzania and Tanzanite in that context. Uganda would deal with its coffee and oil in that context. Rwanda would deal with something else, Burundi something else, Kenya with its agriculture, and that the common things like tourism, we would market ourselves as a single market. South Sudan would also leverage on its minerals and other things. But what do we see? Everybody is now running their race, and the foreigners love it that way. The Chinese love it that way. The British love it that way. The European Union loves it that way. And the net effect is that our economies are now shrinking. And when they are shrinking, you see that our revenues have gone down. We begin to hear that our civil servants' pay and allowances will be reduced. You know that our universities are technically insolvent. You can see the report about Kenya Airways and this massive loss, unprecedented in Kenyan history, that is 6.5 billion, never seen in the corporate industry. So it is about the quality of politics. Nyerere used to say, siri ya maendeleo ni watu, ardhi na siasa safi.
All right. Well, as critics would argue, Magufuli has not been pretty much instrumental in ensuring that there is that existence of East African community integration. Well, I don't know how you would rate his performance in terms of realizing this East African integration and the African integration at large. But importantly, this comes out because of his double-sided approach, in the sense that he is in East Africa and equally on the other side, he seems to be championing on getting Tanzania to the bloc of SADC. What would you say about that?
I think there is a sense in which that must be understood. I personally wish that Tanzania could be a little bit more inclined to the East African community, because we are natural allies in many ways, particularly from the trade aspect. But for some reason which are historical, Tanzania finds itself gravitating more towards SADC. And you must understand this, that when the OAU in 1960s created the freedom fighting movement, the headquarters were in Dar es Salaam. So most of the freedom fighters that you find in Mozambique, in South Africa, in Namibia, in Angola, and were in Tanzania. That affinity, the fact that they fought together, makes Tanzania to feel a lot more inclined to work with SADC rather than to work with East African community, and this mutual hostility between Kenya and Tanzania, which is as a long history. Right. Remember, is Mwalimu Kambarage Nyerere, who referred to us as a man-eat man society. We in turn refer to Tanzania as a man-eat-nothing society. And of course, a Tanzanian once told me, and I'll have to say this, ya kwamba kitu ambacho kinatuogopesha kuingia katika Jumuiya ya Afrika Mashariki kwa miguu miwili ni hili. Nyinyi mna siasa za kikabila na hatutaki kuambukizwa na ukabila wenu, itatuathiri pakubwa wa Tanzania.
With all due respect, in regards to that statement of great minds, we want to capitalize as much. In regards to that, we'd want for you to probably try and see whether we can back that statement by that Tanzanian in relation to what it plays out in South Africa, the South African country itself, Zimbabwe. There's been quite, politics, especially on the aspect of tribe, the Shona, and, looking at this other side. Do you suppose then he had a valid point when you look at such scenarios?
Kenya's politics, from where I sit, is the most ethnicized in Africa. And I can tell you this for a fact. If you look at the manner in which we mobilize ourselves, if you look at any one of the political parties, even in the recent elections, you see the Luhya leaders ganging up and saying, we are Luhya leaders. The Luos say so. The Mount Kenya say so. The Kamba say so. The Coast people say so. We are the most ethnicized in mobilization. The Zimbabwe that you talk about, which I'm familiar with, there may be two major ethnicities, namely the Ndebele and the Shona. But when I listen to President Mnangagwa, he does not describe ZANU-PF as a Shona party, nor does Chamisa do so. And if you go down in South Africa, you look at the ANC, my good friend Cyril Ramaphosa does not describe ANC as a Pedi party or a Ikosa party or a Zulu party, nor is any of these parties. But in Kenya, it is quite obvious that that is how we mobilize. And you had even the president of a republic saying that the presidency should not be occupied by one tribe, an argument that can never arise in a country such as Tanzania. But here we think ethnically. Even our boundaries, our devolution is ethnically founded. Our ethnicity is our problem. And I would urge you and my audience to read a book written by Koigi Wawamwere, which is titled Towards Genocide in Kenya, The Curse of Negative Ethnicity.
All right, as I come to a close of this, still on the very same point now that I'd wish to gather some more information, would you then say that the politics of Kenya has highly contributed to destabilizing the angle of us achieving a unified East African community? Because when you go to the other side, the likes of Uganda, and yes, we know there's so much in regards to the same of tribalism in Ethiopia and the likes. Would it be fair to castigate the rest of the East African communities just because the politics played in Kenya is not healthy?
Not necessarily. The problem that is bedeviling East African community is not just a Kenyan problem. It is an East African community problem, which is born out of hostilities. Remember that one of the problems that we have in East Africa, in fact, in this regard, I may say, that Kenya may have played a greater role in terms of trying to bring integration in certain aspects. For example, in terms of paying our dues. We are one of the countries that pays its dues on time. But when you look at the totality of the situation, you cannot apportion blame in that simplistic fashion. You know, for example, that there has been hostility between Rwanda and Uganda, which led to the closure of the border. That is a problem there. You know that there has been hostility between Rwanda and Burundi during the presidency of President Pierre Nkurunziza, and that is a problem there. You know that there is an unstable South Sudan. There is a problem there. You know that there is a Tanzania which is not so very enthusiastic. So all those factors conjoined do serve to undermine the unity that we desire. And President Museveni, who is now the elder statesman in East Africa, is a person that I expect, particularly during this term, which I hope is his last, is the person who can champion this particular agenda, because he now remains as the elder statesman in this area. And one would also want to see that President Kenyatta, who is now the president of East Africa, the chairman of the East African community, that during these last few months that he is in East Africa, I would want to hear his voice a lot more firmly on East African issues. I want to hear my president talk about the common market a lot more firmly. I want to hear him talk about the monetary union a lot more firmly. elimination of work permits, a lot more family. And I'm very unhappy with my minister for the time being in charge of internal security when he says that the refugee camps should be shut down. He has no idea. The man has no idea. We owe it to our neighbors, because when people are running away from their countries, it's not because they love it. It is because circumstances dictated. What I wanted to hear my minister saying, that the international community and the region and the African Union should assist Kenya in ensuring that there is security and in affording those people who are unfortunate to be refugees to be taken care of. It is in the worst of spirits when a minister says and gives an organization 14 days. Where are those Africans supposed to go? Go back to war in Tigray?
No.
Go back to war in Somalia? That is the kind of attitude that undermines unity in Africa. I'm sorry that I said that.
Well, thank you. Though you read my mind, you answered my last question, that is in regards to the integration and most importantly, the escalating dispute between Kenya and Somalia. As we come to a close, I will allow you that moment as you give us your parting shots and weigh in.
Yeah, perhaps you've mentioned something that ought to be addressed very keenly.
Right.
The maritime boundary dispute between Kenya and Somalia is one that ought to be resolved very differently. I personally have written to the Attorney General, this Attorney General, my good friend, the former Attorney General Gotv, the current Attorney General, and the Solicitor General, because I happen to have expertise in maritime matters.
Right.
And one of the problems that I have is the penchant of our attorneys general to hire foreign lawyers. And when they do that, they then have individuals whose only agenda is to earn fees. And secondly, I believe that the boundary between Kenya and Somalia can be mediated within the context of the African Union. And we exclude the Americans and the Norwegians, who are very surreptitiously causing this conflict. And you could see how confused we were.
Yeah.
At the last minute, we withdraw from the ICJ. Then a few days later, we want to address the ICJ, but it's not too late. My own view is that President Kenyatta and Prime Minister Farmajo should call their technical people to sit down under the aegis of the African Union and ensure that that issue is resolved. Because as it is now, we are almost saying that we are prepared to go to war, which is sad. And I think that we've got to mediate these things and deal with them a lot more firmly. I would want to see a more energetic foreign minister. I would want to see a more energetic minister for region. I would want to see them energize IGAD, energize the East African community, energize the AU for the long-term health of our region, our country, and our
African solutions to African problems remains a dream?
Not at all. Of course, for the moment, it would appear as if it is, because remember that even as we seek a solution to our own problem, there are those who do not want us to have solutions to those problems, because a disorganized Africa is a good hunting ground. If you ask the Europeans, you ask the Americans, you ask the Indians, you ask the Japanese whether they would want us to remain the way we are, they would tell you, yes, in that state, you are good to be consumed. And it is our duty, therefore, having recognized that we must ensure that we don't engage with people from a position of strength. See what the Chinese are doing. They know what they want. They are executing it perfectly. Whether if you want loans, no questions asked. If you want a building to be constructed for you, you are the African Union, they give you one. If you want a center for disease control, they give you one. If your universities want the Confucius Center, they give you one. If you want vaccines, they give you. If you want cars, they give you, because they know he who pays the piper calls the tune. There come a time that we must make our own pipes and play our own music. And that is how I understand those strong words spoken on the 25th, or is it the 24th of May, 1963 by the Osagie for Kwame Nkrumah. If Africa does not unite, If Africa does not do its things in the manner that it should, they must remember that imperialism wears different masks, and one of them is the mask of foreign investment. Under those masks, they prosecute some of the most pernicious projects. We must stop them in their tracks. That does not say that we don't trade, but when trade is confused for trade, I am afraid.
Well, thank you so much, Professor. As we rest the gallant son of Africa to eternal rest, I'd love for you to give your parting shots, even as you celebrate his life once again. And we
when I was in Dar es Salaam 3 weeks ago at a mining conference, which was supposed to be opened by President John Pombe Joseph Magufuli, it was instead opened by Mama Samia Suluhu Hassan. I was asked after the event what I thought about the administration of John Pombe Magufuli and what I thought about him as his distinguishing characters. And I said in Kiswahili, Magufuli ni jagina. Magufuli ni mzalendo. Magufuli ana nidhamu. Magufuli ana ujasiri. Magufuli ana uthubutu. Na vitu hivyo vyote ukiviweka pamoja, unampata binadamu ambaye anampendeza Mungu na watu wake. And whose mortal remains we shall be interring. But John Joseph Pombe Magufuli is dead. Long live John Joseph Pombe Magufuli, because his ideas will be immortalized.
I'd want to ask whether there was nothing probably negative that you saw in him, but as you say, or as they say, in Africa we normally, speak good when...
No, but you don't say that. I always remind people of these famous words of the French philosopher Saint-Just. All human beings are with fault, and nobody can govern guiltlessly. But I remember these words when I was serving as an intern at SPLM in Nairobi with John Garang Kumabi, or he told me, young man, in the journey of life, you have two baskets, the basket of good and the basket of mistakes. Okay. At the end of the journey, make sure that the basket of good outweighs the basket of mistakes.
Wow.
The basket of good that John Magufuli carried far outweighs the basket of mistakes.
Pan-Africanist Professor PLO Lumumba, thank you so much once again for your time. Now let's cross over to a different segment altogether. Yes, and it's not a different segment because it's a continuation of the same. Thank you, Professor, for speaking to us on that one as we commemorate the life of Dr. John Pombe Magufuli. He's being laid to rest today in his home, Geita, Chato, and we'll be having proceedings of the same streaming live, that is right here on the Home of Untold Stories as we commemorate this day. It is important that we all are together with the people of Tanzania, just to give, yes, their fallen soldier a decent send-off. So much is likely to culminate right after that as reality dawns onto them or into them, and as they await to see how Mama Samia Hassan Suluhu will spearhead the day, or will spearhead, of course, the leadership, many exhibiting confidence in her leadership. She as well has maintained the stand that indeed she's capable, and just like Magufuli did, well, as per what it is that the people of Tanzania feel, then she says she is capable to take up the mantle and take the nation to the next direction. So we'll be looking at all this as we follow up on the events all the way from Geita, but that should be after this short break.
So if you come across any disease like yellowing of leaves, rust.
kama kuna mali kuna maji mingi utakuta inamea lakini haitoi ile garlic inafaa itoi, that standard garlic.
We did onion farming. Today we meet Onion's sister, Miss Garlic. Join us this Sunday at 7:30 p.m. as we talk more about garlic farming.
Cooking, jumping rope, skating, playing indoor games are just but a few of the ways we have fun at Kids on the Block. But that can't be all. We also grow and learn. We have science, spelling, and book reading to sharpen our minds. I, Whitney Dambia, will take you through all this gist only on Kids on the Block every Saturday at 9:30 a.m. Stay tuned.
Next episode of Coffee.
Today our guest is Reverend Dr. Chief Inspector William Watitwa Sifuna. Karibu sana. Karibu sana.
I remember one day a Nigerian lady, an officer,
Yes.
calling others, say, come and see this Kenyan madman. Oh, he came here.
Madman.
Madman. I was called madman. Bribery according to the law of Kenya is a crime. But now,
Catch this story every Sunday at 8 p.m. Are you a storyteller? TV47 is looking for that untold story close to you. Tell us the story in 3 minutes. Submit that story to Your Untold Stories at tv47.co.ke and stand a chance to win a camera and other goodies. The top stories will be aired on TV47 and the viewer will vote for the best story through the SMS number 22047. The story must be one that has never been told before. The deadline for submitting the stories is March 29th, 2021. TV47, the home of untold stories.
So if you come across any disease like yellowing of leaves, rust,
Kama kuna mali kuna maji mingi utakuta inamea lakini haitoi ile garlic inafaa itoi, that standard garlic.
We did onion farming. Today we meet Onion's sister, Miss Garlic. Join us this Sunday at 7:30 p.m. as we talk more about garlic farming.